So today I spoke about my research, which features Black people in antiquity, particularly Greek antiquity, looking at their presence in text and in art. I used that as a way to think about the past speaking to the present. So I also integrated modern people, Rachel Dolezal, Trevor Noah, into the conversation, and had the class pretend to be students for some parts to think about ways the past and the present can have horizontal communication rather than vertical, to really create an equitable academic sphere that they can take back to their classrooms. So my dissertation generally is looking at Black skin color in Greek literature. And what I mean by Black skin color is Black like the color of my hair, not Black like the color of my skin or my racial identity. So Black here is very much used to describe how people look without the connotations that we have in the present day, which is really based on the history of the 15th century and the transatlantic slave trade forward. So when I talk about Blackness in this presentation and in my research, I really want to situate it in the past, mainly in the 5th century BCE, in a time before Blackness had a lot of other meanings associated with it and very inflexible treatment of it as well. One side is a Black glazed face, the other side a clay-colored face. And so this spurred me to think about Blackness as a visual, visible, and relevant marker of color in antiquity.
Well, I was talking about how we could use social media in order to teach students to engage with plot and characterization. This assignment, I asked students to take the persona of different characters in a novel, and then they create a Facebook or Twitter page, and then they post as those characters. What students immediately realize is that they must read the story in order to post. They also have to understand the historical context and the cultural context of the novel, because as you know, one of the important elements of fiction is setting. So all those things become very important. But again, it helps them engage with it from their own contemporary perspectives.
I also had the pleasure of meeting Chinua Achebe a couple of times in this life. And during the 50th anniversary of Things Fall Apart, I actually got this autograph by him. Yes, and I got to interview him. So it's my sacred text, and maybe that's why I'm having some confidence that IT or no IT, I should be able to pull this off. So for those of you who have read the text, and for those of you who have not read the text but have read other African texts, I would like to know, maybe turn to the person next to you to talk. How do you approach the text? How do you start teaching it? Where do you begin from?
I'd say that when you teach a text that comes from a period that is so far removed, let's say Things Fall Apart, which is it's not 20th century, then it becomes challenging. I taught Behold the Dreamers, which is set in contemporary America in 2008, and I could see that they easily entered that text because it was within their time frame. So I think the biggest challenge is setting the time frame, and so they easily lose interest. And so, in fact, that's how come I created the assignment to use social media so that they can generate some kind of interest.
Well, there've been a lot of changes which can be divided into different phases, but the phases are not clean-cut or clear-cut, so there's leakage and transpositions and so on. But what one can see is that the kind of novels and narrations and stories that were told by Achebe, Soyinka, and his cohort have now given way to a more problematic understandings of identity in relation to the diaspora in Adichie, Selassie, Tejiko, and others. I'm very critical of this idea that somehow these texts are not literary enough until they can be proved to be instrumental. That is to say, until you as a teacher you can prove that this is illuminating some dastardly aspect of empire or the colonial encounter, the text is not yet literary. But it's not something that we can ignore. But the thing to do is to acknowledge the difference, but not to acknowledge that that difference makes it incommensurate. It's so incommensurable, that is to say, because it is African literature, there is no way you can grasp it unless you are an African. Some people have said that. You cannot grasp Latin American literature, or you cannot grasp African American literature, and it's really, I don't believe in that proposition.
I talked about how we can read African literature as literature, right? Without making assumptions about this text as mirroring reality, right? That we live in a world where readers, publishers, critics assume that African literature coincides or equates with African reality. The moment we assume that African fiction equates to African life, then if you read an African novel where, a guy keeps beating his wife, or you read a novel about, where a woman undergoes female genital mutilation, then all of a sudden it becomes, oh my God, they do that in Africa? I think it's a historical thing, is that historically African literature kind of emerged out of a non-literary context, right? Missionaries were the ones publishing African literature. Colonial educational systems were the only publishing outlets that African writers had in the early 30s, 40s, and 50s. And that somehow everybody just kind of assumed that African literature should always teach us some truth about the African world. And somehow publishers keyed into that and just became used to selling African literature as that literature that teaches you about African life, as opposed to a literature that, someone can enjoy, a literature that can move us, a literature that can be pleasurable, right? And that, so in a sense, I think it's important that we find our way back to African storytelling.